So today on my workbench, I have a Sony PS-X45 turntable. So yes, I bought another Sony, but this I acquired from a neighbor very inexpensively, and she said that it sort of worked, which sounded like a challenge. So it obviously needs some hinges. I know what to do about that. So let's see what else is going on with this. So this is actually a pretty high-end turntable for its time. So it actually has a quartz locked speed control rather than adjustable speed controls. So take a look at the cartridge. All right, so that stylus looks terrible. And I'm not sure I'm familiar with this particular cartridge either. So it is an Accutex cartridge, and it's also woefully misaligned and actually missing a nut here. So I think I'm going to throw something else on there before I actually test it with a record. So the platter's spinning already, so that's a good sign, I suppose. So this quartz light is supposed to light up and stay lit up when the speed is correct. Well, it seems to be trying to make up its mind about that. So this is a direct drive turntable. It has a very nice, thick, genuine Sony platter mat in good condition. And the platter doesn't seem to want to come off. So I'm going to squirt a little WD-40 here around the spindle. It's not going to hurt anything else. Let that soak in and see what happens. So while I let that soak in, I try to do a quick cleanup, and there's some weird corrosion on some of the metal buttons here to figure out what to do about that. But let's see what we can do here. That's better. Okay, well, doesn't look too bad under here. Needs a good cleaning. So the base has some nice adjustable feet on it. I'm just going to remove it by taking out these screws around here. Okay, so the feet stay behind. So some of this looks familiar. There's so many parts. So the plinth is made of that sintered metal that the other Sony turntables are made out of, which gives it a lot of weight. So to try to see if I can make the motor run more smoothly, I'm going to take the motor out and service it. So the motor is attached to the circuit board, so I took out these 4 screws and these 2 screws, and now it should come off. So like the Sony PST1 turntable, there's a lot of wires attached here. So as not to mess things up too badly, I'm just going to pull this out with it in this position. There we go. So I'm going to give the well here, as well as the shaft, a good cleanup with Q-tips and alcohol. And this has a captive ball bearing here in the bottom, so there's nothing to fall out here. I'll tilt the turntable up so I can put some oil into the well here, and then reinsert the motor shaft and have the oil stay where it's supposed to. So if you put too much oil in, as I seem to have done, you're going to prevent the motor from going back together. So I took some of the oil out, and I'm going to flip it over and let gravity do some work to get that seated where it's supposed to be. So I saw this interesting line in the instruction manual. I doubt they thought that the life of the turntable would exceed 45 years. So with the motor relubricated, there should be nothing mechanical preventing it from coming up to speed. So I'm going to check it with both my app and the little light here. And the light is staying on, and it's just about 33.29. that's pretty good. Switch it to 45. Okay, so service and lubrication seem to have helped that motor quite a bit. So with the motor running well, it's now time to test the other mechanical functions of the turntable and see if it can make some sound. So it came with this Accutex cartridge, and I'm going to look into salvaging this in the future, but for now I need to test it with something that I already have. So I'm going to mount it on this very nice all aluminum Sony head shell, which is proprietary to this and other turntables in this line. And looking at the instruction manual, it gives the criteria for mounting. So according to the manual, the cartridge gets mounted pretty much dead straight in the head shell, like that, so perpendicular to the front face. And then the tip of the stylus should be 37.5 millimeters from this flange. So, did the best I could, so I have my caliper set at 37.5, and if I eyeball that, that looks pretty good to me. That's a starting point, and of course I'll check the alignment later with the gauge, but this should be enough to get us started. Okay, so I've mounted the head shell, I've set the tracking force, so let's give this a try. Okay, so when I press start, the tone arm does not seem to be moving. Let's switch it to manual. It does pick up at the end of the record and moves back. So it seems like the auto start does not work, but the auto stop does. So I'm going to start up top with the mechanism here. So to remove this white gear, I need to first remove this E-clip here. So I got it off, and nothing looks too terrible, but there's lots of gummy grease on there that I need to clean away. There's also a bushing on this shaft right here that needs to be removed and cleaned and re-lubricated. And also I need to move this arm in both directions to clean underneath it. So I'm going to then re-lubricate this with super lube grease, and then this is the pin that rides in the middle of this heart-shaped groove right here. So I need to make sure it goes in there when I put it back together. Okay, I've got it back together. It seems to be operating smoothly. So these parts up here, I'm going to leave them alone. They seem to be moving pretty freely, and experiences showed me that if you mess with these, you have more chance of screwing it up than of fixing it. So I'm just going to leave it as is. So on the underside, there's a lot of dried up grease here as well. So I'm going to start by cleaning that with WD-40 and Q-tips and re-lubricating and see if that helps the situation. So I don't want to take apart any more than I have to. I'm afraid of messing things up. But one thing that seems to be very sticky is this part right here. Seems like it should be moving a lot more freely than it does. So I'm going to remove this E-clip and pull this apart. And I'm glad I did that. It was very gummy, so that should clean up pretty well. And I'm glad I did that. That really is an improvement. So this turntable is mechanically a little simpler, but electrically more complex than other turntables, including other Sony turntables. So this over here is the start-stop switch. So when you push it, there's no rod or physical connection, but actually it activates this solenoid, which pulls this lever here and activates the mechanism that moves the toner. Wow, that now works pretty well. So with the motor and the physical functions working, you can now see if it actually makes some sound. So it's now hooked up to audio. Not a whole lot of hum, that's good. So I'm pretty pleased with how this is working so far, but this is interesting. So I'm going to put the cueing lever up. So So the turn arm goes up, but then a few seconds later it goes back down. So I have to have a look at that. So here you can see the cueing mechanism. So this black plastic rod, which is out of round, turns, and it puts pressure on a copper spring that's below it, and between the plastic rod and the copper spring is some sort of lubricant. So the question is that grease that's supposed to make it move more smoothly, or is it a sticky damping fluid that's supposed to resist movement? I think if I take out this screw, enough of it may come apart that I can access that more easily. But the lever itself is held to the shaft with this little screw, so I'm going to need to take that out to get this out. So I clean it up with dry Q-tips to get the grease off, then Q-tips with WD-40 to dissolve what was left, and then dry Q-tips to get it dry again, and looks pretty good. So the grease in it did not seem as ancient as the grease in other parts of the turntable. So I wonder if this was greased more recently by somebody who wasn't sure what to do, and maybe it was greased too much. So I'm going to try this with no lubrication at all and see if that makes a difference. So like the Sony PS-T3, for the cueing mechanism to even work, the turntable actually has to be activated. So put it back together, so it lifts up and falls right back down. Lifts up, falls right back down. So since what I did made it worse, I took it apart again, and this copper spring is what provides the thing for this to turn against. So it occurred to me that over time it may have lost some of its springiness by being compressed. I'm going to try to bend it up a little bit and see if it corrects that. And that does seem to have made a difference. So where I am going to apply some damping fluid is right here. So in this gap around the post that moves the tone arm up and down. I'm gonna work that in a little bit and let it sit overnight so gravity can do its work. So the cueing is now working very well. So I still have not put anything on that copper spring, neither any kind of lubricant like grease or damping fluid, but that problem seems to be solved. It'll remain in the up position for hours and hours now, not seconds. So this turntable has some really nice details, such as these feet, which screw in and are similar to those on a Technics SL1200 and are still nice and squishy. The tone arm is made of metal and is very nice, but it looks like the bearing assembly here is made of plastic like other similar turntables, but it's not. It's all machined aluminum. In fact, this whole assembly is made of metal. So it's not a particularly exotic design, but it's beautifully made and it now works perfectly. Now onto the cosmetics. So these metal buttons have some weird corrosion on them. And I tried a variety of cleaners to get this off and it didn't seem to work. So what I'm going to try is some very, very fine sandpaper. Specifically, I'm going to use some 3000 grit sandpaper and a little bit of water. I'm going to test it on one of the buttons first and see if that helps. I didn't go too far with it. It definitely made a difference. Some black gunk came off of it, but even with sandpaper, it shows how sort of tenacious this stuff is. So this turntable did not come with hinges at all, which is not surprising because these break a lot. So these hinges are used by other Sony turntables as well as other brands like Kenwood and JVC. So I've ordered multiple sets of these in the past, and I'm going to get another one for this one. Okay. So that could still use a good polish. I did another video on that, which I'll link here, but that is working. So I also still need to select a cartridge for this permanently. So I think a good match would be something like this. So this is similar in concept to Dual's ULM or ultra low mass tone arms of the late 70s and into the 80s. So Dual uses the Ortofon OM series, and this is essentially one of them. This is the Ortofon Omega 1E, so it's a low mass cartridge, which is well suited to this arm, so I think that would be a good choice. I don't have one of these right now, so that's something for the future. So that about does it for this Sony PS-X45 direct drive turntable. So I was really impressed with this Sony turntable. I think it's exceptionally well made, and it was a high-end model in its day. It retailed for about $200 in 1981, which is about $750 today. So except for the cartridge, which I haven't done yet, and the hinges, all it really needed was a good cleaning and lubrication and adjustment to get it running back to spec. So I would certainly recommend this model to anybody looking for a vintage turntable, even though it's a Sony, and it was a real pleasure to work on. So thanks for watching.